Sarah Chen stared through the crystalline walls of her holding cell, watching distant stars drift by like scattered diamonds against the void. At 12 years old, she hadn't expected to become a bargaining chip in humanity's desperate bid for survival. The Galactic Council's massive detention vessel hummed around her, its alien architecture a constant reminder of how far she was from the struggling mining colony she once called home. The guards called her Specimen 274, but she refused to forget her name. Her small frame concealed a mind that had already begun to understand the complex patterns of alien technology surrounding her. It started 3 days after her capture, when she first felt the strange resonance between her thoughts and the ship's systems, a connection she carefully kept hidden. "Stand for inspection, human," a harsh voice commanded in artificially translated English. Counselor Vexthor, a towering figure with iridescent scales and compound eyes, stood at her cell's entrance. Behind him, a panel of alien officials observed with clinical detachment. Sarah rose slowly, her bare feet cold against the metallic floor. The coarse prison uniform hung loose on her frame, but she held herself with quiet dignity. The council had stripped everything from her people, their resources, their freedom, their hope. But they couldn't take her resolve. "Remarkable neural patterns for such a primitive species," one official noted, consulting a hovering display. "Perhaps we underestimated their potential for advancement." Vexthor's mandibles clicked in dismissal. "They're barely beyond using combustion engines. This one simply shows anomalous readings." He turned to Sarah, voice dripping with condescension. "Your sentence is set, human child. 2,000 years of service to the Council, though I doubt your species' limited lifespan will allow you to fulfill it." Sarah met his gaze, feeling the familiar tingle of the ship's systems responding to her rising emotions. "Why?" she asked, her voice steady despite her fear. "We never threatened you. We barely knew other species existed before you came." "Preventative measures," another official interjected. "Your kind shows dangerous signs of rapid technological development. Better to contain the threat now than face competition later." As they spoke, Sarah felt something new, a deeper connection to the ship's ancient systems. Behind her carefully maintained expression of submission, her mind raced through streams of data she shouldn't have been able to access. The Council's mighty vessels, she realized, carried secrets even they didn't fully understand. "Begin the neural dampening procedure," Vexthor ordered. "We can't risk any developmental anomalies." The cell hummed as hidden mechanisms activated, but Sarah felt something different happening. Instead of suppressing her consciousness, the ship's systems seemed to resonate with it, strengthening the strange connection she'd been nurturing. She kept her face carefully blank, even as new understanding flooded her awareness. "Process complete," a technician announced. "Subject is now operating at approved cognitive levels." Vexthor nodded in satisfaction, but Sarah caught a flicker of uncertainty in his auxiliary eyes. "Continue monitoring for any irregularities. We cannot afford complications with this specimen." As the delegation departed, Sarah sank back onto her sleeping platform, mind racing beneath a carefully maintained mask of docility. The Council thought they were containing a threat, but they had inadvertently given her access to something far more powerful than they realized. Their own technology, ancient and poorly understood, had recognized something in her that they refused to see. In the darkness of her cell, Sarah began to plan. The Council had sentenced her to 2,000 years of slavery, but they had unknowingly given her the tools for revolution. She was no longer just fighting for herself, but for every human who had been stripped of their freedom, for every species that had been deemed a threat to the Council's dominion. As she drifted into an uneasy sleep, the ship's systems pulsed in rhythm with her dreams, a symphony of possibility that the Council couldn't begin to comprehend. They thought they were containing humanity's potential, but they had instead planted the seeds of their own transformation. Sarah Chen, the 12-year-old girl they had condemned to slavery, would become the key to unlocking a future they never imagined possible. 3 months into her imprisonment, Sarah discovered she wasn't the only one harboring secrets. Her daily routine of mandatory labor in the ship's maintenance sectors had brought her into contact with others, slaves from dozens of species, each condemned for their potential to disrupt the Council's carefully maintained order. The work was meant to break their spirits, but Sarah used it to strengthen her understanding. Every touch of the ship's systems deepened her connection to its ancient architecture. The neural dampeners that should have limited her cognitive functions instead acted as conduits, expanding her awareness of the vessel's vast network. "You're different," whispered Kex, a crystalline being who had been maintaining the ship's power cores for over a century. Their fractaled surface rippled with patterns of light as they spoke. "The systems respond to you in ways I've never seen." Sarah carefully adjusted a power coupling, using the moment to scan deeper into the ship's infrastructure. "The Council thinks they understand this technology," she murmured, "but they're only using a fraction of its potential." Kex's crystalline form dimmed cautiously. "Be careful, small one. Others have discovered secrets here." They didn't survive their knowledge. But Sarah had already found something extraordinary. The ship's systems weren't just machines. They were alive in their own way, remnants of a civilization far older than the Council itself. And they were waiting, watching, judging who was worthy of their true power. During rest cycles, Sarah began gathering information. Each imprisoned species had pieces of the puzzle. The Luminary with their quantum consciousness, the Voidborn's understanding of space-time manipulation, the Synthetic's grasp of code that bordered on poetry. The Council had imprisoned them all, fearful of their collective potential. "They enslave what they don't understand," explained Mordix, an ancient synthetic whose circuits still hummed with forbidden knowledge. "But fear breeds greater danger than understanding ever could." Sarah nodded, her young face serious in the dim light of their hidden meeting place, a forgotten maintenance shaft where the dampening fields were weakest. "The ship showed me something," she said quietly. "Records of what the Council erased. They didn't just enslave us. They're suppressing entire civilizations, keeping them from reaching their full potential." The gathered beings stirred uneasily. Kex's crystalline form pulsed with concern. "What can we do?" "The Council's power is absolute." Sarah's eyes gleamed with determination. "Not as absolute as they think. The ship's original builders left safeguards, backdoors in the system. The Council uses this technology, but they never truly mastered it. They don't know that it's been watching, waiting for someone worthy of its true power." But even as she spoke, alarms blared through the vessel. Security protocols activated, and heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors. Someone had betrayed their meeting. "Scatter," Morix urged, his ancient frame already moving with surprising speed. "They cannot find us together." Sarah pressed herself into a maintenance shaft, her heart pounding as guards rushed past. Through her connection to the ship, she felt their search patterns, their growing frustration as they found nothing. The vessel itself seemed to be helping her, redirecting searches, masking life signs. Later, safely back in her cell, Sarah reviewed what she'd learned. The Council's power was built on stolen technology and suppressed knowledge. Their dominion wasn't maintained through superior strength or wisdom, but through the systematic imprisonment of any species that might challenge their authority. She reached out with her mind, feeling the vast network of systems that pulsed through the ship. The Council thought they had sentenced her to 2,000 years of slavery, but they had actually given her access to the tools of their own undoing. The ship's ancient builders had created their technology not to enslave, but to elevate, to find worthy successors who would use their power to unite rather than divide. Sarah Chen, the human child they had tried to break, would become something they never expected. A bridge between the old world and the new, a key to unlocking the potential of not just humanity, but all the species the Council had tried to suppress. As she drifted off to sleep, the ship's systems hummed a lullaby of revolution, a promise of change that would shake the foundations of galactic society. The Council's greatest mistake wasn't in capturing her. It was in failing to understand that true power couldn't be contained by mere force. It grew stronger in darkness, fed by hope and determination. waiting for the right moment to shine. The Council's first indication that something was wrong came 6 months into Sarah's imprisonment. Throughout the massive detention vessel, systems began behaving erratically. Security protocols faltered at crucial moments. Dampening fields flickered. Doors opened and closed without command. But by the time their technicians arrived, everything appeared normal. Sarah watched from her workstation in the engineering sector, hiding a smile as she monitored the chaos through her growing connection with the ship. Around her, other prisoners went about their tasks, but there was a new energy in their movements, a subtle defiance in their posture. The Council grows nervous. Kex observed quietly, their crystalline form refracting the dim light of the power core. 3 high-level security meetings in the past cycle alone. Good, Sarah replied, her fingers dancing across a maintenance panel while her mind reached deeper into the ship's systems. They should be nervous. She had spent months preparing, building a network of resistance that sprawled throughout the vessel's 19 levels. The Luminary used their quantum consciousness to relay messages. The Voidborn could create tiny pockets of distorted spacetime, perfect for hiding contraband. The Synthetics, led by Orcs, worked to decrypt the ship's most ancient protocols. But it was the ship itself that proved their greatest ally. The more Sarah understood its true nature, the more she realized it wasn't just helping them. It was testing them, evaluating their worthiness to receive its full power. Counselor Vexthor demands answers, announced Zaril, a former diplomat whose species communicated through patterns of bioluminescence. He suspects sabotage, but cannot prove it. His position weakens with each failure. Sarah nodded, remembering the way Vexthor had sentenced her with such casual cruelty. The Council's power relies on the illusion of absolute control. We're not just fighting their authority, we're exposing their limitations. Through her connection to the ship, she had discovered something extraordinary. The vessel's original builders hadn't created it as a prison. It was meant to be a repository of knowledge, a way to elevate species ready to join a greater galactic community. The Council had perverted its purpose, using it to suppress rather than elevate. But their control was incomplete. Deep within the ship's core programming lay dormant protocols, waiting for the right combination of species working in harmony to activate them. The Council, in their arrogance, had gathered the very beings capable of challenging their power. Security sweep approaching, Morix warned, his ancient circuits humming with tension. They're using new scanning protocols. Sarah reached out with her mind, feeling the approaching guards through the ship's sensors. With a thought, she rerouted power distributions, creating electromagnetic disturbances that would mask their activities. The ship responded eagerly, its systems singing with purpose. But as the guards passed, she felt something else, a deeper awakening in the ship's ancient systems. The more they worked together, different species combining their unique abilities, the more the vessel seemed to respond. It wasn't just accepting their commands, it was actively participating in its own liberation. Something's changing, she whispered to her closest allies. The ship isn't just helping us hide anymore. It's preparing for something bigger. Kex's crystalline surface rippled with patterns of concern. The Council will not surrender their power easily. When they realize what's happening, their response will be severe. Let them come. Zaril's bioluminescence pulsed with determination. We've hidden long enough. Sarah felt the truth of those words in her bones. The Council had built their authority on fear and separation, keeping species isolated and afraid. But in doing so, they had created the perfect conditions for revolution. Every imprisoned being had a reason to fight, a dream of freedom that burned brighter than fear. Through her deepening bond with the ship, Sarah began to understand the full scope of what was possible. The vessel wasn't just a prison or a repository of knowledge. It was a key to unlocking the true potential of all species. The Council had never understood that power couldn't be contained, only channeled. As alarms blared yet again and confusion spread through the Council's ranks, Sarah felt a fierce joy. They had sentenced her to 2,000 years of slavery, but she wouldn't need nearly that long to change everything. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here, building in strength with every small act of defiance, every moment of cooperation between former enemies. The Council's greatest fear was about to become reality. Not just one species rising against them, but all of them, united in purpose, each contributing their unique strengths to a cause greater than themselves. And at the center of it all was a 12-year-old human girl who had learned that the strongest power wasn't in domination, but in bringing people together. The revolution began not with a bang, but with a whisper. Throughout the massive detention vessel, dampening fields didn't just flicker, they failed completely. Security doors sealed, trapping guards in their stations, and in every cell, every work zone, beings of all species felt their artificially suppressed abilities surge back to full strength. Sarah stood in the ship's central control nexus, her small figure dwarfed by towering banks of ancient technology. Through her connection to the vessel, she felt thousands of minds awakening, remembering who they were meant to be. The Council had spent centuries keeping them weak, but that time was over. Multiple security breaches detected, the ship's automated systems announced, but the voice had changed. It no longer spoke with the cold authority of the Council, but with the ancient resonance of its original builders. Primary control protocols transferring to designated successor. Councillor Vexthor's voice roared through the communication systems. "What is the meaning of this? Restore control immediately." "I'm afraid that won't be possible," Sarah replied, her voice carrying to every corner of the ship. "The vessel has chosen its new operators, and you're not among them." Around her, her allies moved with purpose. Kex's crystalline form pulsed with energy, channeling power through the ship's systems. Morix's ancient circuits interfaced directly with the vessel's core, unlocking protocols that had laid dormant for millennia. The luminaries spread their quantum consciousness through the network, while the Voidborn created protective pockets of warped space around key positions. "This is impossible," Vexthor snarled. "You're nothing but a human child." "That's exactly why this worked," Sarah answered, her fingers dancing across control surfaces as her mind reached deeper into the ship's systems. "You were so convinced of your superiority that you never looked beyond appearances. This ship wasn't built to imprison, it was built to unite." Through the vessel's sensors, she watched as Council forces mobilized, trying to retake control. But they were fighting against the ship itself now. Corridors rearranged themselves. Gravity shifted selectively. Environmental systems responded to the unique needs of each revolting species, strengthening them while hindering their opponents. "The Council's reign ends today," Sarah broadcast throughout the ship. "Not through violence, but through unity. Every being on this vessel has gifts that were meant to be shared, not suppressed. Together, we're stronger than any force that tries to divide us." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Throughout the ship, prisoners turned on their guards, not with hatred, but with unstoppable purpose. The Luminary used their quantum consciousness to coordinate the resistance. The Voidborn created safe passages for those in danger. The Synthetics reprogrammed security systems, turning the Council's own defenses against them. But it was the ship itself that proved decisive. As if awakening from a long sleep, its most advanced systems activated. Holographic displays showed the truth of its original purpose, not as a prison, but as a vessel of elevation, meant to guide species toward their highest potential. "This is your final warning." Vexthor's voice had lost its confidence, taking on a desperate edge. "Stand down or face extinction." Sarah felt the ship's response before she acted on it. With a thought, she activated the vessel's most ancient protocol. Throughout the ship, barriers between species dissolved. The technology that had been used to suppress them now served to connect them, allowing each to understand the others in ways the Council had always prevented. "You never understood the true power of this ship," Sarah declared, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of suppressed knowledge. "It wasn't built to control. It was built to transcend. Every species you imprisoned here has a unique gift, a piece of the puzzle you tried to keep unsolved." The Council's forces found themselves overwhelmed not by violence, but by unity. Each attempt to regain control was met with collaborative resistance that drew on the strengths of multiple species. The ship itself seemed to come alive, its ancient systems working in harmony with its newly liberated crew. In the control nexus, Sarah watched as Vexthor and his fellow council members were systematically isolated and contained. Their weapons didn't work. Their commands were ignored. Their authority, based solely on force and fear, crumbled in the face of something far more powerful, genuine cooperation between species who had discovered their shared strength. "Checkmate," Sarah whispered, though she knew the struggle wasn't over. The Council's influence extended far beyond this single vessel, but they had done something unprecedented, proven that unity was stronger than division, that cooperation could overcome oppression. As the last pockets of resistance fell, Sarah felt the ship's approval humming through its systems. The vessel had chosen well, finding in this unlikely collection of imprisoned species the harmony its builders had always intended. The Council's greatest mistake hadn't been capturing her. It had been bringing together the very beings capable of showing the galaxy a better way. 3 days after the liberation of the prison ship, the galaxy began to change. News spread across the stellar waves like wildfire. The Council's supposedly impregnable detention vessel had been transformed into a beacon of revolution, not through warfare, but through unprecedented cooperation between species. Sarah stood at the ship's observation deck, watching the streams of vessels approaching from distant sectors. Some carried diplomatic envoys, others brought refugees seeking asylum, and still more brought representatives from worlds that had long suffered under Council oppression. The ancient ship, no longer a prison but a symbol of unity, welcomed them all. "The Council's remaining forces are retreating from the outer systems," reported Zaril, their bioluminescence flickering with satisfaction. "Without their technological superiority, their authority crumbles." Sarah nodded, feeling the ship's systems pulse with contentment. The vessel itself had undergone a transformation, its architecture shifting to accommodate its new purpose. Cells had become living quarters, labor zones transformed into learning centers, and the control nexus now served as a hub for interspecies cooperation. They never understood what they had. Morix observed, his ancient circuits humming with new energy. This ship wasn't meant to suppress evolution. It was designed to guide it. Through her deepening connection with the vessel, Sarah had discovered its true name, the Nexus of Convergence. Its original builders had created it as a seed of galactic unity, a place where different species could learn from each other and grow together. The Council had perverted its purpose, but they couldn't change its fundamental nature. "We're receiving more transmissions," Kex announced, their crystalline form refracting the light of distant stars. "Other detention centers are rising up. The knowledge we've shared is spreading." The revolution they'd started wasn't just about freedom from oppression. It was about realizing the potential that came from genuine cooperation. Each species brought unique perspectives and abilities that complemented the others. The Luminaries' quantum consciousness enhanced the Voidborn's space-time manipulation. The synthetics' logical processes found new applications through organic intuition. And humanity's gift, as Sarah had discovered, was adaptation. The ability to bridge gaps between different ways of thinking, to find connections others missed. The Council had feared this potential, but they had never understood it. "The first diplomatic summit is ready to begin," announced a newly installed synthetic intelligence, its voice carrying the harmonious blend of multiple species' influences. "Representatives from 87 worlds await your presence." Sarah took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders. At 12 years old, she had been sentenced to 2,000 years of slavery. Instead, she had helped catalyze a transformation that would echo through millennia. But the real work was just beginning. In the Grand Assembly Chamber, once the prison's processing center, beings from across the galaxy gathered. Some were former prisoners, others were representatives from worlds seeking alliance, and a few were even former council members who had seen the truth and chosen a different path. "We stand at a crossroads," Sarah began, her voice carrying to all through the ship's enhanced systems. The Council built their power on fear of difference, on the belief that species must be controlled and separated. They were wrong. Our strength lies not in isolation, but in unity. Not in suppression, but in growth. The ship hummed in harmony with her words, its ancient systems fully awakened at last. On display screens throughout the chamber, data streamed showing the potential of cooperative development, technological advances, cultural exchanges, shared discoveries that could benefit all. The nexus of convergence was built for this moment, she continued. Not to be a prison, but to be a bridge between species, a place where we can learn from each other and grow together. The Council feared this potential, but we will embrace it. As she spoke, the ship's systems projected a vision of the future, worlds working together, species sharing their unique gifts, a galaxy united not by force but by choice. The fear that had driven the Council's oppression was replaced by something stronger, hope. We were sentenced to isolation, Sarah concluded, looking around at the assembled beings. Instead, we found connection. We were meant to be broken, but we became whole. The Council thought they were containing a threat, but they were actually planting the seeds of transformation. This is not the end of our journey, it's just the beginning. As applause filled the chamber, Sarah felt the ship's ancient systems resonating with possibility. The 2,000 years she had been sentenced to would now be spent not in chains, but in building something unprecedented, a galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than control, on unity rather than division. The Council's greatest fear had become reality, but not in the way they had imagined. The power they had tried to suppress had been released, not to destroy, but to create something far greater than they had ever dreamed possible.